11, 13, 19, beyond the trouble with yes and. A nice reader sent me a note in response to my recent piece, The Trouble with Yes and. In that piece, I mentioned that I knew and I had worked with Paul Sills. I didn't know you knew Paul. I trained with him. I trained with him and Mike Nichols and George Morrison for 2 years in New York at the New Actors Workshop. Mentors all, and all gone now. I understand your point, but yes and was to keep one out of their heads and work as an ensemble, rather than using but, which is shutting down what's in the moment and going into one's conscious and not subconscious. I answered, that's interesting. I guess I do it differently than they did, with different artistic and social aims. Paul, Viola are influences on my work, and I really loved Paul, but now I'm on my own. She replied, we all do. Did you know them? I said, I wrote about it in the piece. I knew Paul, not Viola. I met Nichols. I had a very small role in his movie Heartburn, and Morrison, but I wasn't part of that school at all. I was there a few times meeting Paul. Maybe I did a workshop there. I met Paul when I was in the Second City Resident Company. Bernie Solins told me to take a workshop with Paul. We hit it off. In the mid-1980s, I would sometimes take walks with Paul around New York City, get coffee. I had a different type of relationship with him. As much as I was in Second City, I was really something different. I did one performance of Sills and Company, and he didn't ask me back. I understood. I am not by nature an ensemble player. I'm a writer. Now I will answer more in full. I personally don't believe in training in the arts. I inaccurately describe myself as a teacher, but that's not true. I would never go into a classroom if money wasn't involved. Money for me. I don't teach a class. I share my art with them. I invite the students to share their art. Then we talk about all of it and do it again. I'd really rather just write. The classroom is a compromised place. It artificially limits art. I don't like collaborating with my students. I'd rather just get to the truth undiluted, not diminished by the terms and proportions that whoever happens to be around can understand. A great thing about art is you just put it out there, and it can be met at the various levels of individual audience members. When I write, I don't have to worry about being materially useful to my students or to entertain an audience. My entire focus is to explore reality and truth. It isn't poetry to say that writing is always unfinished. No one ever fully understands the world or themselves. When it works, the artist surfs on the constantly changing reality of his essence, in harmony with the constantly changing world. I have written that experience is the artist's teacher. Experience, when viewed from 50,000 feet, is a pretty simple affair. There is the individual, conscious, unconscious, physical, emotional, existential, spiritual, in relation to everyone and everything else, the world. There are moments of epiphany where a hidden reality becomes visible. Each microcosm reflects each macrocosm, and vice versa. You can say yes, and you can say no, but the fact is that reality keeps rolling on, no matter what you say. You can add to reality, but if what you add isn't real itself, part of the stuff of reality, reality will reject your artificial invention and throw it back in your face eventually. I don't see why but would throw one into her conscious mind. If an individual is creating from her authenticity, anything she might say is the truth as perceived from her perspective, whether she's conscious or not. The conscious mind has a great role to play in artistic creation. When engaged in my prostitution as a teacher, I'll call upon my experience as a writer and improviser and my training as a lawyer. I do believe in legal training. Training is a way of learning how to do the tasks of a job. Training is about technical skill. My website gives you a better idea as to how I present it. And the website is richardthomasjd.com. Art is not a job. It's work. An artist is guided by his own real impulses, which do not derive from the ego. Beyond fear and desire, an artist, when engaged in real work, does and says what he must do and say. He is not a participant in a local community. He dialogues with the world. The local collective should adapt to its true artists, and over time usually does. The artist should never accommodate the local collective. I have done many things in my life in many settings. When I worked at Second City, I began in harmony with the group. Yes-anding, although we didn't call it that, was easy for me because my consciousness matched the consciousness of the group. But as I grew, my truth changed, my personal truth, not an understanding of some absolute truth. We are all limited by our own perspectives. No one has the vantage point to see the all. I outgrew Second City in stages. In the last show that I opened at Second City, I physically broke away from the rest of the cast. I did most of my scenes downstage center, directly addressing the audience and not relating to the other actors. The next stage of breaking away was conflict, a tension between me and the group. And the next stage after that was leaving. The next stage after that was Second City became part of my past. And the next stages after that was my transformation into the next community and communities that I participated in. The cycle repeated itself in the world of business, the practice of law, and teaching in higher ed. Eventually, my participation in local communities fell away in total. An artist is completely with the world and paradoxically outside of the world. To identify with a group is to be in conflict. To participate in life, a state of being beyond what we merely think about life, is bliss. One exists on two planes. We choose the sides that nature has assigned us, as we simultaneously and humbly understand that each point in the universe is the center of that infinite space, including the point where we stand. From that perspective, everything is wonderful. We live our lives in fierce opposition to the detonation of hydrogen bombs while we appreciate their horrible beauty. Acceptance of who we are, where we are, and what we do. We play our parts in the play of existence, and we are also the play itself. We oppose fellow players or ally ourselves to them and admire them all the same. We live placing 1 foot in time and 1 foot beyond time. Our individual memory and our collective history and our individual and collective futures all reside in the now. We proceed chronologically as we transcend the time-space continuum. I have not lived my life yes-anding. Life is not lived when you are yes-anding. We are children and follow the rules of childhood. We rebel against them and become adolescents. We mature into adulthood. Some of us become outlaws, reaching for something more. Finally, we become lovers, engaging in the passion for the activities and the people we were born to love. The individual and the world atone, become one. Each transformation involves breaking and tearing and pain. I think Paul Sills was frustrated. I think he wanted to be a writer. He wrote many notes when his mother Viola was writing improvisation for the theater. She didn't use a word of them. He told me this regret. He described his work as being part of the family business. He never made the step of following his own impulses and creating from his own voice. Paul's interest and dedication to the collective was born of his misunderstood and misplaced loyalty to his family. Love's nature changes. And by the way, I am by no means certain in my assessment of Paul Sills. What is important here is that it is my assessment. This really isn't about him at all. He's not around now to clarify. It's about me. What I see in Paul, I see in myself. I had an easier family hand to play. I was devoted to my mother, who recently died, for the entirety of her life. I still am devoted to her. My mother was not a genius like Viola Spolin, so she was infinitely easier to transcend in the realm of my creative work. My love for my mother was a constant, not unlike my love for improvisation, the law, and education. But my relationship to her and all of those things has changed more than once. Everything changes. I was a certain type of son until the day that I married. I married late. I was 57. I was a certain type of artist until I started this blog at around the same time. Marriage does not involve loving the person that you marry. It is about committing to loving all that the person will become and fully participating in the changing dynamics of the interactions between her transformations and yours. A marriage is a creative thing. It is not an invention. It is not built. You accept your wife and let her change you as you change her. That, it seems to me, is the natural course of life and art. Substitute writing for marriage and the world for my wife, and the previous paragraph relates to my work. Reality is not something to be agreed to. We really have no choice in the matter. Reality is something to be understood to the best of our ability. We don't have to add to reality. It's impossible to add to reality. Reality is a shifting point. We are most fully conscious when our being is congruent with that shifting point. Change is natural. It comes whether we know it or not. I've experienced change in pleasant ways and in harsh ways. Change is indifferent to my comfort or pain. We are given the conscious mind to understand life, not direct it. That, it seems to me, is the natural course of life. Yes, and shuts down both the conscious and unconscious mind when the total mind and soul is at the point of expansion. Accepting the limits of a particular group imprisons us and denies us full participation in life. The members of my ensemble are every person who ever or who will ever live. It is not constricted to 6 other people with whom I happen to share a stage or a faculty lounge. Even the most well-intentioned teachers of any of the arts and their students remind me of Chairman Mao and his followers during the Red Chinese Cultural Revolution. The teachers have their little black book that delineates the teacher's claimed wisdom, values, and objectives. The students subjugate themselves to the teacher's will. The students become slavish cogs in an inauthentic machine of the egoistic teacher's invention. Acting teachers are the most unreal because they improperly tell students how to act. Roles on stage or in broader life have requirements. How to serves those requirements. But the person underneath the role's costume, recall the old improvisation maxim, wear a character as lightly as a hat or coat, cannot be directed. The proper relation to another person is love, not control. We have to see others and open ourselves to be seen by them. I do more by showing myself to you in these writings than I have ever done supposedly teaching anyone. You do more by listening to me than you ever would do by performing my assignments. We shouldn't consciously or unconsciously act, easier said than done. We just need to be with each other. Challenges are existential, not psychological, easier said than done, squared. All real action comes out of our presence. We don't create together in an ensemble, community, or company. We influence one another And the universe in total influences us all. Let me do that again. All real action comes out of our presence. We don't create together in an ensemble, community, or company. We influence one another, and the universe in total influences us all, and true action happens. At peak moments, we come to truths that are found in everything and everyone, truths that unite us. The world is not a choir singing in one key, relying on the directions of a conductor's baton. The world is a harmony of infinite and diverse songs. Copyright 2019, Richard Thomas.